Most people didn't notice me. To them, I was just the old man who slept under the overpass near Oak Ridge Avenue, a shadow hunched beneath a blanket of patched tarps and tattered coats, with a shopping cart full of soda cans and memories no one asked about. I didn't blame them. People are busy. They have homes, routines, children to pick up and bills to pay. I understood. Life moves fast, and old men with weathered faces don't exactly scream importance. But I noticed everything. The way Mrs. Langford's shutters rattled on windy nights. The way the kids from Cedar Elementary took the long way home if it looked like rain. The way the storm drains on Brook Street never seemed to drain quite right. You learn things when you live on the edges of a neighborhood. You see it without the noise, the distractions. You listen in ways others forget to. My name is Walter, by the way, Walter Briggs. I wasn't always invisible. Once, a long time ago, I wore a uniform. I stood tall. I had medals in a drawer and a daughter who called me Dad before she was taken from me by time and choices I'll never get back. But that's not the story I'm here to tell. This story starts the day I smelled the storm, before it ever touched the sky. It was a Tuesday, late April, too warm for the season. The wind carried a heaviness I hadn't felt in years, not since the monsoons back in Southeast Asia, where we learned to read the clouds like lifelines. The birds were quiet that morning. The squirrels were agitated. Even the stray cats stayed under the dumpsters, twitchy and restless. I walked down to the drainage lot behind the grocery store. The water line was high. Too high. I knelt down, touched the ground. The earth wasn't just wet. It was saturated, like a sponge seconds from spilling. Something was coming, and fast. I tried to tell people. I walked up to the library steps and warned the clerk. The water's rising faster than the ground can take it. She smiled awkwardly and nodded. Okay, thank you, sir. Do you need a bottle of water? No one really listens to a homeless man in a stained coat. I moved on. I went to the fire station. They were kind, offered me socks, a cup of warm coffee. But when I mentioned the runoff patterns near Brook Street, the lieutenant smiled politely and said, "We've got alerts for that kind of thing, sir." But alerts come from satellites. I come from the dirt, and I knew, in my bones, we were running out of time. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat beneath the bridge, listening to the wind howl louder than usual. The clouds moved in too fast, like bruises blooming across the sky. By midnight, the first crack of thunder split the air, and the rain came down hard. Angry rain, the kind that doesn't just soak, it shakes. I crawled out from under the bridge, limped toward the neighborhood. Most people were asleep, except for the earth and me, and the creek that had just begun to rise. The creek behind the church had never looked like that before. It wasn't a creek anymore, it was turning into a river. A fast one. I waded into the edge, just to test. It was up to my knees in minutes. And this wasn't even the worst part. The real danger? The drainage system. It was clogged. The water wasn't going through the pipes under the street. It was backing up, swelling into the gutters, and soon it would spill into the basements along Brook Street. I knew what that meant. The ground was soaked. The runoff had nowhere to go. The hill that curved down toward the neighborhood playground, that would become a slide of mud and broken tree limbs. I'd seen it before, in another place, under another name. But those kids, those families, they hadn't. I limped toward the park, my legs still stiff from an injury years ago, an old war wound no one asked about anymore. I banged on the maintenance shed until the lock finally snapped. Inside, I grabbed what I could, a yellow safety vest, a rusted old bullhorn, and a forgotten laminated map of the storm drain system. Next, I went door to door. At first, only dogs barked back. Then porch lights flicked on. Then suspicious voices through peepholes. "Who's there?" "What do you want?" "It's the middle of the night." But I kept shouting. "Flood's coming from the north. You've got less than an hour. If you live on Brook Street, pack up now." Some folks ignored me. I expected that. But then one young father, holding a sleepy toddler, stepped outside barefoot and asked, "You sure?" I looked him in the eye. I'd bet my life on it. And I was. Within 15 minutes, he was dragging bags into his pickup truck. He called his neighbor. She called another. Someone called the school janitor. They opened the gym. Within half an hour, a handful of families were moving. Fast, confused, but moving. Some cursed me under their breath. Some cried. A few tried to pray. But they moved. And then the rain doubled. The mudslide started at 4:17 a.m. A giant tree from the edge of the playground ripped out of the ground like a matchstick. It crashed through a fence. Mud poured like soup down the hill, swallowing the old bike path, then smashing into the row of duplexes on Brook Street. Basement windows shattered. Cars floated. The park bench I used to sleep on disappeared under brown water. But no one was in those homes anymore. Because I'd knocked. The firefighters arrived just after dawn. They looked at me, covered in dirt, shaking from the cold, bullhorn cracked in half under my arm, and asked, "Who started the evacuation?" Someone pointed, and for the first time in years, someone said my name, Walter Briggs. By morning, the entire street looked like a war zone. Cars were buried halfway in sludge, mailboxes torn from the ground, trees split down the middle like broken promises. But not a single life was lost. The mayor arrived by noon, flanked by reporters and assistants in pressed coats. They surveyed the damage, nodded somberly, and asked the fire captain, "How many?" "None," the captain said, eyes tired but grateful. "No casualties. Early evacuation saved them." "And who called it?" The captain turned toward me, still in my tattered yellow vest, rain-drenched and shivering, standing beside the same cart of bottles I always had. "That man," he said simply. "Walter Briggs." The mayor blinked. "And who is Mr. Briggs?" The captain hesitated, not out of disrespect, but out of a quiet kind of shame. "He's the man who lives under the bridge." The news spread fast. Local papers ran a story the next day. "Homeless veteran sounds alarm, saves neighborhood." I didn't like the word hero. I'd known real heroes. They didn't get headlines. They just did things, quietly, without fanfare. But something changed after that morning. People started stopping me on the street. They brought me coffee, hot soup, new socks. A teenager even gave me a waterproof blanket and a backpack, said his dad insisted. And most of all, they said my name. "Thank you, Walter." "Morning, Mr. Briggs." "Hey, Walter, you staying warm today?" After years of being invisible, I had become someone again. Not just the man beneath the bridge. I was Walter. And that meant more than any medal ever had. One morning, a woman approached me, middle-aged, kind face, eyes full of nerves. I think you knew my brother," she said softly. "Corporal Dean Harding. You were in Echo Company, right?" I nodded slowly, surprised. Dean was a good man. Her hands trembled as she held something out. A worn photo of two young soldiers, arms slung around each other, dust on their boots and sunlight in their smiles. "You saved him once," she whispered. "He wrote about it, in a letter. I found it after—" Her voice broke. "I just wanted to say thank you, and to tell you, you still matter." I didn't cry right away. I waited until she left. Then I sat on the curb, that photo in my lap, and wept for a long, long time. Not just for Dean, but for the years I thought I didn't count anymore. That week, the city offered me a room at the new shelter uptown. It wasn't fancy, shared bunks, thin mattresses, but it had warmth, showers, a key card. I said yes, not because I wanted a roof, but because I finally believed I deserved one. And besides, there was work to do. More storms would come, and maybe this time, someone would listen sooner. But even if they didn't, I'd be there, watching the water, listening to the earth, and knocking on doors if I had to. Because some names are worth remembering. And some men, they were never meant to be invisible. The shelter was simple, but to me, it was a palace. A mattress that didn't sag. A hot shower that didn't turn off after 3 minutes. Clean clothes. A mirror. I didn't recognize the man in the mirror at first. Not because I had changed too much, but because I had stopped looking for so long. I'd avoided reflections, afraid they might show the cracks. The years lost. The eyes that had seen too much and spoken too little. But now, something was different. There was pride there, quiet, weathered, but real. The street I once wandered quietly had started to greet me like an old friend. Children waved when they saw me. Parents who once clutched their purses tighter now offered sandwiches or folded bills. Teenagers called out, "You good, Walter?" with genuine care in their voices. Even the local barber shop hung a framed photo of the mudslide aftermath, with a small brass plaque beneath it. To Walter Briggs, who saw what no one else did and acted when no one else would. Every time I passed it, I paused, not out of vanity, but gratitude. For once, I had become part of something. One afternoon, as I sat on the bench outside the library, a small girl in a red hoodie came and sat beside me, maybe 7 or 8 years old. She had frizzy hair, missing front teeth, and a lollipop that was quickly turning her tongue blue. "Are you the man who saved my dog?" I blinked. "Your dog?" She nodded seriously. "You banged on our door and told Mommy to leave. We took Max with us. If we stayed, Max would have drowned. Mommy said so." I felt a lump rise in my throat. "Well," I said, "I'm glad Max is okay." She reached into her tiny backpack and pulled out a drawing. It was me, stick figure style, big gray beard, yellow vest, and next to me, a dog with a wagging tail. "I made it for you," she said. "You're like Batman, but with mud." I took it like it was the Mona Lisa. Later that week, something else happened. The neighborhood association, the same one that used to glance over me during street cleanups, called a meeting. They proposed naming the small green space near the old park bench Walter's Watch, a plaque, a bench, a tree planted in my honor. I stood up at that meeting, hands trembling, unsure if I should even speak. But I did. "I'm not special," I said. I just didn't stop listening. The earth warned me. The storm warned me. I remembered how to pay attention, and that's something we all can do, especially for each other. The room went quiet, then applause, then standing applause. I didn't do it for praise. I didn't want statues or speeches. I just wanted people to see the world again. The signs, the ones who are forgotten, the dangers we dismiss until they're on our doorstep. But still, when they planted that tree in the spring, a red maple, my favorite, I sat beside it on the new bench, smiled, and whispered, "I see you too," because this time, the street had remembered me, and I would never forget it either. Not every storm is made of wind and rain. Some settle quietly inside you, a silence that hums through your bones, a kind of weight that no shelter can fully lift. Even as the neighborhood embraced me, I still walked alone at night. Not because I had to, but because some habits don't break easy. I liked the quiet. I liked watching the streetlights flicker on, one by one, like old friends saying, "We see you, Walter." But sometimes the memories would catch me. The war, the letters I never answered, the funeral I missed because I couldn't afford the bus fare, the people who called me crazy when I first warned them. There were nights I sat by the river listening to it rush by and whispered apologies to names I hadn't spoken aloud in years. Dean, Charlie, Luis, even my younger brother Martin. He'd tried to reach me once, years ago, showed up at a shelter with a suitcase and hope in his eyes. I pushed him away. I thought I didn't deserve his kindness. But now, I wished I had let him sit beside me, just once. The counselor at the shelter, a gentlewoman named Clara, encouraged me to write. "You've carried the world in your chest for too long," she said. "Let it out. Let someone else hold part of it." At first I scoffed. What would I write about? Mudslides and coffee cans? But one night I picked up the pen and wrote, "There was a time I thought my life ended when I left the battlefield. But I see now that was just where the war began." I wrote about the rain, the feeling of being invisible, the night I knocked on doors and begged people to trust me, the sound of that little girl saying I was like Batman, but muddy. I didn't sign it. But Clara read it and cried. She shared it, and a local blog picked it up. Then a news site. Then a radio show. People started calling me a voice for the unseen. Me, Walter Briggs. The man with the torn gloves, the limping leg, the old dog tag still tied to my shoelace. That winter I got a letter from Martin. "I saw your story, Walt. I never stopped thinking about you. If you ever want to talk, I'm still here, still your brother." I held that letter for hours. Didn't open it at first, just pressed it to my chest like a lifeline. I thought of all the years I spent in silence, thinking I had no one. But the truth? People were always there. I just hadn't believed I was worth staying for. That was my storm, the one I carried. But now I knew. Even the strongest storms pass. Even the loudest rivers calm. And sometimes the ones who walked alone the longest are the first to lead others to safety. Spring came quietly that year. The red maple by the bench unfurled its leaves like soft hands stretching after a long sleep. The sun returned, hesitant but warm, and the sky, so wild months before, now sat still, calm, like it too had made peace with itself. I hadn't seen Martin in over 15 years, but one Thursday afternoon, as I sat reading the paper by Walter's watch, I saw him. Same eyes, just older now, a little rounder in the face. He walked slowly, like he wasn't sure if he'd be welcomed. "Walt," he said. I stood, heart racing. We didn't hug right away. We just stood. Two men with years of silence between them, eyes locked like brothers remembering a language they'd once spoken fluently. "I kept your letters," he said quietly, "even the ones you never sent." I laughed, softly, shakily. "I kept your photo in my card all these years." We sat for hours on that bench just talking. No big emotional outbursts, no rehearsed apologies, just two men trading stories like kids trading baseball cards. He told me about his kids, his wife, the bakery he ran. I told him about the river, the mudslide, the girl with the red hoodie. And somewhere in that conversation, something settled inside me, like a stone finally dropped into place. The city held a small ceremony that summer. A bronze plaque was installed at the base of the tree. It read, "To Walter Briggs, who listened when no one else would. A soldier of storms, a guardian of neighbors, a man not forgotten." I wore a clean jacket that day. Clara pinned a small poppy to my lapel. Martin stood beside me. The girl in the red hoodie sat on her mom's shoulders, waving like always. There were tears, speeches, applause, but the moment that stayed with me came after everyone left. An old man, maybe 70, approached slowly. Worn cap, weathered eyes. He held out his hand. "You don't know me," he said, "but I was like you once. Thought I didn't matter anymore. Thought I'd just disappear." He looked at the plaque, then back at me. "Not anymore." We shook hands, no words needed. Some weeks later, I returned to the bridge. The city had cleaned it up, added lights, planted flowers. But one thing remained, the mark I had carved into the metal rail long ago. WB, just 2 letters. But they used to mean invisible. Now, they meant something else. These days, I sleep in a bed. I drink hot coffee with friends. I help Clara run community patrols. Sometimes I tell kids stories about rainstorms and foxholes and the power of a knock on the door. And sometimes, just sometimes, I sit quietly beneath the bridge. Not because I have to, but because that's where I remembered who I was, where the world went dark, but I still chose to light a lantern, where I became more than a shadow in the rain. My name is Walter Briggs. I am a veteran, a neighbor, a man who once walked alone. And now, I am seen, I am heard, and I am home.